Biden's poll numbers are not doing well. I mean, people can say, well, maybe the electorate is going to be a different than we know, and there's still plenty of time. But there's a lot of things that suggest that the Biden administration is just simply not getting it. And I think one of the things that is, obviously is highly problematic is well, I think the biggest thing that Biden is wrestling with is what is our support for the onslaught and slaughter, essentially, in Gaza. If anything, in addition to the fact that I think we're at a majority of Americans now who think that there should be a ceasefire, certainly the voters that Joe Biden's looking for overwhelmingly support a ceasefire. But even if that is not enough to influence people's voting, the engaged people who are engaged in politics, who would otherwise be going out and organizing on behalf of Biden, regardless of whether they thought he was the peak choice, as it were, the optimal choice, are not doing so. You have the Biden administration, or the Biden campaign just reported the other day in CNN that they're having to basically avoid protests, which means they're not going to college campuses.
Yep.
They're not driving out the youth vote. They're not going into places where they may encounter protesters about Gaza. This is a real problem. The other, I think, sort of like broader problem that Biden has is about leadership. He has ceded the territory of leadership to Donald Trump, if you ask me, by doing stuff like this. Here's Chris Murphy, sort of exemplifying the mindset, the mind virus that Democrats have. New polling showing that when Democrats explain how Republicans killed the toughest border bill in decades, Republicans' 15-point advantage on the border disappears. Time to go on the offense team.
A link to a Third Way article.
Well, I mean, putting aside the fact that it's the worst people in the world are promoting this, go to the front page of Atrios. I mean, I've gone on this rant before, but I just want to read what Atrios writes, which is exactly the case. Fighting in enemy territory. He writes, I know how this works. They run dumb focus groups. Focus groups are almost always dumb in politics, from which they learn that if they patiently explain to voters in that closed environment that Trump sabotaged the bipartisan border deal, which was tougher than any border deal in decades, then those voters nod their heads and say, wow, bad Trump. They conclude they have a winning issue. Then those voters leave the containment field and go home and turn on Fox. The focus group itself is made up of a group of people who have expressed concerns about the border, providing this feedback loop for all involved. More broadly, focus groups can tell you if a particular advertising pitch might work. Bring a group of soda lovers together in a room and ask them if this particular pitch will get them to buy Pepsi instead of Coke. It does not tell you that the soda question is the burning question on everybody's mind.
Yes.
If you go on the campaign and start talking about nothing but the soda question, you alienate the people who never drink that crap. Also, Coke has better brand appeal as a soda, not everything, and 20 times the advertising budget, and you can't get everybody in the focus group room to pitch this one-on-one. There is no effective retort to Pepsi Schmepsi.
Atrios is the best.
Also, this isn't polling, it's push polling.
Incredible. Yeah.
I mean, so the bottom line is more or less what I've been saying for a while is that when you start to adopt the framing that the border's in crisis, all you're doing as Joe Biden is saying, A, the crisis happened on my watch. There's a crisis. I'm not doing anything about it. But then you say, but the reason why I'm not doing about it is because I can't get Congress to do what I want them to do. And then the answer as to why you can't do that is because Donald Trump can get them to do what he wants them to do. In other words, I'm failing on a leadership level.
I mean, the opening part of this third way piece that he's linking to, which is like embarrassing that Chris Murphy is linking to this as somebody who like tries at least in some ways to be left of center of Democrats in the Senate. Artificially. I mean, in the end, he ended up voting for the supplemental to send all that money to Israel, despite the tough talk. At the beginning, like one of the takeaways of this focus group, while Republicans start with a 15-point advantage on their approach to immigration and the border, a Democratic offensive strategy touting the deal completely erases that edge. But like that was within the context that Atreus so hilariously described of this hermetically sealed focus group. But when you leave that study, the reality that we're still living in still exists. Like you go into a movie theater and watch a movie and maybe it gets people to think a little bit differently and have more empathy to certain groups, but that doesn't mean it's going to like change their voting patterns, right? If they see like a gay romance, they still may be bigoted later. Republicans start off with a 15-point advantage in their approach to immigration and the border. Is this takeaway? Is this focus group saying that the Democrats' approach has cut into that? Because it doesn't show any evidentiary support to support that outside of this very specific focus group instance.
The problem is that when you say we are doing what the Republicans want, but they still won't take the deal because Donald Trump is forcing them not to take the deal, all you're talking about, all it becomes at that point is a leadership thing. Now, if you have the opportunity to walk through all of these voters on how it is, how Republicans are gumming up the works and not doing anything, you might be able to get there. But there is an easier path to go. That is to actually have a better policy that doesn't alienate your people who are invested in the immigration issue and present that to Congress, then say they're not voting for it. And then go out and say, you know, this is a problem, that this better vision of immigration, this is a problem with the Congress. They are a do-nothing Congress. Like, pull up the amount of bills that this Congress has passed is half the number of the worst Congress ever before this one in terms of ineffective. Yet, we hear nothing about this because they exclusively want to run against Donald Trump. Well, if you want to run against Donald Trump, you can still look at this. 2023, fewest laws in decades. Look at that. It's not even close. Scroll up just a little bit so I can see what the two different colors are about. It's insane. It's the most unproductive in history by a factor of, I don't even know what I can say. And the idea that he's not running on this, and if you need to say the reason why they're doing so poorly is because Donald Trump is that, then you do that. But by essentially capitulating on the immigration thing. Now, again, this didn't happen. The bill didn't pass. But it does alienate people who are working on this issue and people who care about it.
Yeah.
And it also sets a marker in the future as to what becomes the reasonable deal to be made amongst the press.
And Kane, let's just like imagine for a second the situation's in reverse. Like I'm looking at issues that Democrats have an edge on, right? Abortion, climate change, those kinds of things. Can you imagine the Republicans saying, we're going to give you the Green New Deal. We're just going to give it to you as a part of this negotiation that we're doing. And it's just the extremist Democrats that are not allowing it through because they're so ridiculous. But they're like, would Republicans then think that they would make gains on the issue of climate change in the voting public's eyes?
It's West Wing brand.
It's never, ever done in the reverse. It would never happen.
It's by political professionals who have no actual real attachment to what's going on at the border. It's just a game.
And for abortion, for example, the Republicans just hide the ball and try to pretend like it doesn't exist until it's time for them to strike in the legislature and the judiciary.